I was thinking about the interview. And this is the first time this has happened in a while where like I was having dreams the night before and like tossing and turning, asking the questions. And I was trying to find a spot with you and the lighting wasn't right and the cameras kept not working. And then all of a sudden you morphed into Geddy Lee, which I have no idea why that happened. And then sure enough, here you are with the Jays hat on today. Are you a big Jays fan?
I am, and in fact, Getty and I went to the same high school. We lived down the street from each other.
Oh,
I
no
played,
way. That's hilarious.
I played on a baseball team that the guys in Rush sponsored, a fast pitch softball team through the '90s, and Getty and Alex were on the team, and I was the pitcher. And we played in north end of Toronto. We played. It was a league, and they were. It was called Those Darn Fish. And so I've known Getty's brother Alan, who's does all the videography stuff for them, um, is was really close friends with my younger brother. And Alan ended up being a video producer for a long time for Revolver Films. So I even made a bunch of videos with Alan. So the family and I, like, we've kind of known each other a long time. So there you go. Maybe it's just Jews from Toronto. That's your connection.
I don't
So
know. I feel like the scene is actually quite small. So that I guess maybe subconsciously the reason you morphed into Getty in my dream was because um, I'm a Toronto boy as well. I grew up around Avenue in Eglinton, Avenue in Lawrence.
yeah, sure.
This is a fun fact that I've never shared with anyone ever. My last name originally is actually Goldman. I'm not a Gonda. Gonda is a fake name that came from my grandfather changing from Goldman. But growing up in that area, I too was a ball player and I was on the North Toronto All-Star team. And would you know it, Gary Lee's son Julian was on my team. So I had this
Right.
weird childhood before I got into music of playing ball with Julian and my dad playing tennis with Getty. And that was kind of the start for
Well,
me of
at
what
York
is music.
Rapids. At York Rapids.
I don't know that he played with Gideon there, but there was like a tennis court on Avenue Road, sort of like south of
Yep.
Lawrence Park.
It was on the east side. It was red clay behind a church.
That's
I
right.
played there
That's the
too.
one.
Yeah, but Getty belongs to York. Um, or maybe we don't have to tell anybody that, but because I played with
Well,
him there. I played with him there. I play a lot of tennis. I play like 4 or 5 times a week now. So
good for you.
yeah,
My dad was actually like a world champion ping pong player before Canada even had an Olympic team. And then he had a really bad car accident in the 90s, which resulted in him having broken wrists and not being able to hold a racket anymore. But he
right.
got into tennis and now he's like top 100 in the world for his age group. He's like playing all over the place.
Well, I'm surprised he's not playing pickleball, which is what old people generally do. They start
I
playing
don't know
pickleball.
how that became such a thing.
Less movement, it's sort of more inclusive. Um, at the high level, you got to be really good, but at the low level, anybody can. I don't play. I kind of refuse. It's that to me. I got new knees
Yeah,
a couple of years ago. I had double knee replacement, and so now I'm playing like I did 30 years ago. So it's good. I'm playing tonight,
good
in
for
fact.
you.
Yeah.
Staying active. So there's like a lot of sports in and around the music industry. I mean, going back to what you said before, the music industry in Canada especially just feels really small and tight. And you kind of moved into it, right? Like born in Jersey and then moved into Toronto. Like where in your life did you have that I love music and I have to do this moment?
Well, I actually moved to Canada when I was 2. My mom was from Manhattan. My dad was from Toronto. And so the family moved to Toronto just to have a better support system. Um, when I was 2, my brother was 1. And, I guess music was always a big part of my life. My mom was really into music. I remember seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. I saw them when I was 6, at Maple Leaf Gardens. Um, I don't remember much of it except that it was loud, but that wasn't the music, it was the fans screaming. Because back then they didn't have PA systems. They had the public address system. Like the amps were just the amps. They didn't mic them or anything, and they just had the vocals coming through what, the stadium announcer used. So you
Yeah.
didn't hear much. My first real show that I can remember, I was 12 or 13, and I saw the Guess Who at Maple Leaf Gardens. Around the same time, I saw Delaney and Bonnie and Friends and Grand Funk Railroad. It was supposed to be Sly and the Family Stone, but Sly used to cancel all the time, and he canceled. And little did I know what I was seeing, because back then, if there was a band playing and they canceled, they just put different bands in, and most people ended up going anyways. Like that's kind of how it
Yeah.
was. And fast forward, I found out later in life that Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, that Eric Clapton was the guitar player, but I didn't know who Eric Clapton was at 12, 13 years old. So I was just watching. They had one hit, I think, at the time, and
Mhm.
like an AM track. But I was always into music. Got into Led Zeppelin, when I was 13, 14 years old, then got into more prog rock stuff. And I used to sing in bands in high school. Um, but I always wanted to be around the scene. And I moved to LA for a couple of years from 79 to 81. And when I came back, a friend of mine had a band that was signed to a record deal, and they wanted me to come on the road and be their tour manager and do lighting for them. I had done some lighting in LA. I came back in 81, and this friend of mine, their band broke up. I was supposed to go on the road with them, and then they ended up breaking up, and they ended up getting another guitar player, reforming as a different band. And they approached me in the same year and said, we want you to be our manager. And that was like mid 81. And I said, well, I don't know anything about it. And my friend, who was a childhood friend of mine, he was the drummer. His name's Coleman York. Um, he said, don't worry, you'll be good. I went, okay, I'll do that. And that's all I've done since.
That's amazing. So you almost just fell into it because you were a good person and this person said you'll be good at it, and so you just took a chance and went from there?
He had seen me in some of the meetings when we had meetings with the agent about going on that tour, and he sort of seen me how I asked questions and all the
Mm.
things that were, and I think he just thought, I was the kind of guy that could get shit done. So, yeah. So I started in like mid 81, and I was working, you know, part time, or almost full time at a stereo store. And I remember this date forever. It was November 29th, 1981. Um, I went into work. It was a Friday, and the boss called and he said, where were you yesterday? Because I had called in sick on the Thursday. And I said, oh, I was sick. And he goes, no, you weren't sick. And I said, nah, you're right. My band had a last minute gig. I had to go to London, Ontario for the gig. And he goes, okay, you're fired. All right. And that was the last time I worked for anybody.
I mean, like, when life gives you an opportunity, sometimes you just need to take it and follow the path, and take the chance, take the risk. It sounds like you never looked back, and that was like the beginning of the next phase of the music career.
And fast forward a bunch of years later, this same guy had a company, I think it was called Beamscope, and they would sell printers, and they, a big company, right? And I needed a printer. And I talked to my brother because he's a techie, and he said, oh, well, call this guy. And, you remember him. He's selling printers. So I called him up. He goes, well, I'll only sell it to if you come up and see me. Because now I was managing the hip and things like were happening. And so I go up and see him, and we're in his office. And I say to him, I never got a chance to thank you. And he goes, why? And I said, well, and then I recounted the story, how he had fired me. And I said, because of you, because you were such an asshole, I decided that I'm never going to work for an asshole again. I said this to him, and he loved the story. He loved it. And then we're going to his lunchroom. He had like 300 employees, and we go into this lunchroom, and he stands up on the table, and he's like, you see this guy? I fired him and look at him now. Like he was so proud of the fact that he was the guy that fired me. So, yeah.
How much of that is important to your life and career so far? The ability to roll with the punches, pivot, not take something personally, and just kind of fall into solution rather than, sit there and dwell on what has happened.
That's a good question, Chris, because I feel that's kind of my thing, um, having really thick skin and being able to
Mm,
just like, we're in a business where most people say no more than they say yes. So if you can't handle no, you shouldn't be in this business. And
yeah.
so um, it's always been a part of, my dad died when I was 17. So I kind of grew up with a lot of loss. And so uh, I'm used to kind of just moving on. And
Mm,
today it's even more relevant because, I'm 67 years old. I don't live my life with a rearview mirror. Some people would say, well, you should, celebrate your winning wins and, look back more often. And it's like, you know, I, 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 I probably do, but I don't do it, in a big way. You know, I don't rest on it. I don't, use the term rest
yeah.
on my laurels. Right. So I appreciate the wins, but, I'm always looking for the next win. And that's kind of how I've always been.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I think it's important to acknowledge, the result of the hard work, but then realize that the work isn't done and that you're simply hitting a new milestone and a new level and you have to keep going and aspiring higher.
Yeah, I don't know
Do
if
you
it's
think
necessarily about higher. Sometimes it's just about different. It's just about doing more things, right?
good point. Yep.
This idea of like climbing the mountains. Okay, when does the mountain end? Right. So I think you have to be realistic about it. But for me, it's always about doing different and unique things and setting new bars, not necessarily bars that are higher, but new ways to do things. I've always been I jokingly call myself the 67-year-old Gen Z because I'm always looking at new technology and new ways of doing things and new ways of attacking things. Um, you know, uh I've always been big on using the internet as a marketing tool. You know,
Mhm.
we were doing stuff in 93, 94, 95 before anybody was doing it. So, when most, we had websites for our bands when the record companies didn't even have websites, so.
Yeah, I think it's important to pivot. You referenced Jonathan Simkin before we start to record, and one of the things that I respect about that guy too, outside of the authenticity and the honesty, I think that's so important in life, let alone the industry. But he too was talking about how they would just try different strategies. And I think he referenced Mariana's Trench, where he said like, we didn't do it the traditional way. I don't know if he said we didn't go to radio, but they went online with everything, and the campaign had great results. And he said, "Okay, well, you see, we tried something new, it worked, and now we have to pivot with other artists as well."
Hmm. Yeah, I think every artist is different. Um, I think that you have to look at things, uh, uh, you know, artists create differently, artists create different music. There's all kinds of ways to the good news is there's way more options now than there ever has been. It used to be you went to radio, before there was online. You went to radio, you went to retail and hoped something happened, and you toured.
Mhm.
Nowadays, there's so many other outlets. But, I've said this more and more and more and more and more. Every time I do a podcast, I say the same fucking thing, which is, all of it is still access, though. That if you're not fucking great, none of it matters. You still need
Mhm.
access. And access is you still have to be amazing for people to actually give a shit. So you can have all the pipe in the world to get you to that. But if you're not great, it's not going to stick. So,
Yeah.
and that hasn't changed. Um,
Quality of the music, quality of the art above all else.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that should be what
So
everyone strives for.
Totally agree. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm running new businesses. It's the same thing too. If I don't have a service offering that is focused on quality, where we're really going into the details and asking ourselves what is it that we can provide above, above and beyond for the artist, then we're not going to succeed. It's the same principle.
Hmm.
Um, you mentioned something just there about the mountain and pivoting. It's an interesting point. And you're right. I mean, I've referenced Tupac before. Even a genius asks questions. You really you don't stop. So you've had manager of the year nominations, and I believe it was in 2024 that you
Wins,
were inducted to. Sorry,
wins, not nominations.
wins. Sorry, I meant wins. I meant wins.
Wow.
And then last year it was the Hall of Fame induction. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
So, with such because you're at a different level of success and accomplishments, what is that pivot? What does it look like for you when it comes to, where you go from here after having so many accolades?
I don't, the accolades are just recognizing what I've already done. I'm just thinking about what I'm about to do. I
Mm,
I don't see them as having anything to do with what I do. That's someone else saying to me, we really want to recognize you. And I've been fortunate enough that I've been recognized a bunch of times for a bunch of different things in my career, but that's just it already happened. So I'm always thinking
right.
about the next thing. And like I said, those things don't pay the bills, right? The old joke was gold records and no walls to hang them on. So I'd rather have the walls than the framed plaques. So I'm just thinking about, what's the next thing to do? I signed a new client. I signed Broken Social Scene in the last couple of months, and they have a new record. I have a whole bunch of stuff happening with the hip next year. Um, there's a lot going on, and I just want to keep working on all of those things, and launching new opportunities. Um, that's
Yeah.
my I don't really care about what already happened. I appreciate being recognized, but, in 2024, we started it actually in 21. I decided I'm going to executive produce a film, which was the Tragically Hypno Dress Rehearsal documentary. That's the first time I'd ever done anything like that. So that was a new challenge. And then getting it out there and marketing it and working with the Amazon Prime people and launching it at TIFF and working with TIFF. Those were all new things I hadn't done before. But we pulled it off. We ended up
Yeah.
winning 7 Canadian Screen Awards. It was, awards in Calgary, awards at TIFF, and all of that. But at the end of the day, the best thing it did is it grew the hips audience combined with all the other marketing stuff we did that year, by 35-40% and made it younger. I just got some new data yesterday that 35% of their audience now is under 35 years old, which
That's
is
amazing.
crazy. Yeah, which is crazy. So I'm more excited about that kind of stuff than about getting an award. Well,
Absolutely. And let me rephrase the question because I think it came across incorrectly because of me. So I really admire this guy in New York, Ryan Serhant. He's a developer, or not a developer, sorry, like a real estate mogul. And he has a catchphrase that is expansion always in all ways. And it's really about growing. It's not about what you've done and getting nominated for this. It's about constantly growing. So you just referenced the the docuseries and that and trying new things. Do you have specific things that you're looking to do with artists? Like grow your business, help more artists, help them in different ways? Are there additional projects? What does your expansion or your future look like to you?
well, I don't like to have a giant roster. It's never been my thing. Um, I work with right now. I have three acts: The Pursuit of Happiness, Broken Social Scene, and the Tragically Hip. The Pursuit does a few shows every year. Um, a bunch of years back, we put out a greatest hits package. Now we're going to put it out on vinyl this year. Um, but they all do other things. Um, Broken Social Scene is a world class touring act. They tour everywhere. That probably demands more time because of that. Um, And then, they haven't put out a record in 8 years. And as a new client, we're going to relaunch everything. You know,
Hmm.
the couple of filmmakers made a documentary about them last year, but it's only been in film festivals, and they've done some specific screenings, but it's on Crave here in Canada, but it's not available for the rest of the world. So now I'm working on that rollout for the rest of the world, so we can take advantage of that film, and tie it to the new record. For me, it's always about dreaming up new ways to market and new marketing ideas, and working with the teams at the record companies and the promoters, and you know, I have a great social media team that works with me, um, that takes on a lot of that kind of stuff. Like, we really work all the socials.
Hmm.
That's important today to get the word out. The beauty of socials, and also, a band specific mailing list, is it lets us communicate directly with the fan, without having gatekeepers. And that's something I've been wanting to do and using, whether it was, we used to do mailing lists with snail mail, like actually print a newsletter and put it in an envelope back in like 91, 92. So this is something I believe I've been a part of my philosophy for many, many years, is the better we can communicate directly with the fans, the better it's going to be for all of us. So
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I want to talk more about management and some of the things that come with your job, and what management looks like now versus in the 80s and 90s. But before we do, um, you and I are both Aries. I'm well aware of my of my shortcomings, as well as my strengths and abilities. One of which is my tenacity, is my stubbornness. Does any of that factor into where your career's gone and how you do work?
that's funny. I don't know how many people will be able to relate to this, Chris. When's your birthday?
April 15th, but,
So,
where I'm going with this is simply, like, the resolve that one needs to help artists to be in the industry
you know,
and
eh,
continue moving along. Where does
yeah,
that come from for you?
I think it's, I don't know. I think, I like to say, well, I'm an Aries, like, we're the leader of the zodiac, but so many people don't believe in that. So, and then there are people that do believe in it. I'd like to think that, that's a big part of me, or maybe we're just, rationalizing it, that I
Mhm,
am this, so therefore I am this. Um, I don't know. I think, having my father die when I was really young had a profound effect on me, and more subconsciously than it's kind of
mhm.
forced me to have to do things on my own. And you spend your life. My dad always used to say, "Stay in school." He wanted me to be a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. And obviously, as soon as he passed away, I was like, "Nah, fuck that. I'm going to do whatever I want." And so here I am doing this. Um, uh, which, I finished high school. I never um, went to university. I did like 6 months at college and got bored. Um, so uh, I I I don't know if the resolve comes from just being forced to have to deal with stuff, and not having a choice,
Mhm.
or maybe because I get bored. So it's like time to do new cool things. That's the beauty of
Yeah.
the business, is like, we're not punching a clock. It's always something new. There's always something cool and new to do. So that keeps me excited.
It's I appreciate you sharing a bit and mentioning your father. Like, the more I do these conversations, whether it's with musicians or people within the industry like yourself, a manager or a label president or technician, I kind of half expected everyone to say, "Oh, I had a hard upbringing, and I had to, like, I was by myself and out in the streets, and I had to do this." But the majority of the people so far have come from really good families, and they've had such positive encouragement, and even the parents going out and helping along with the career. I'm just fascinated about the resolve, because the higher you get, the harder it is, the lonelier it is, and the more you need to motivate yourself. And so I'm just curious what some of the tools are that you might have. You know, when you wake up in the morning, you say, "Okay, another one. I know that I got setbacks, but I'm going to keep going." Do you have anything specific that you
No, because
like any tools? Well,
no, I literally don't think that way. Like, I literally just do. I don't think about doing,
mm,
I just do. It's not in my nature to think about it. Um, I look at my schedule the day before. Okay, what do I got? Who else do I have to call? What else do I have to do? You know, time to think about new things. Um, I just do. I don't give it a lot of thought. And maybe that's why I've been pretty good at what I do, is because I don't like make a list. It's not how I work. I'm
yeah,
I'm I'm all about just getting shit done and serving my clients to the best of my ability and sticking up for them. There's a lot of people out there that are always trying to take advantage. And so, I'm a gatekeeper, and at the same time, I'm a facilitator. My
yeah,
job is to create opportunities for the artists and let them. Yeah, if we use a baseball analogy, it's like I can get them at bats, but they still have to hit the home runs. Um, my job is to get them at bats,
that makes
and
sense.
so I don't I don't think I have any tools that I actually mark down and say, "Oh, I'm going to use this one." I just do it. It's sort of innate in me.
Totally understand and appreciate that. Some of us are wired in a way where we have no choice but to keep going. I feel the same way. I don't know how to not go and grow. I don't know how to stop. You're it's a well-known fact that you're one of Canada's most successful artist managers to date. You've just mentioned that you don't know how to not stop. What sets you apart? Do you believe in honesty? Do you believe in integrity? Is it because you have a small roster? Why are you so good at what you do?
Well, I think honesty, integrity is. I think you have to have that. I think, while I can be really tough, my reputation is that I'm going to be really honest, and I'm
Mhm.
not going to waste people's time. I think integrity is really key, and you can spot the bullshitters a mile away. So I've always, you know, pay my bills, but make sure I get paid for my clients. Um, I think it's a big part of being really good at what you do. I think that um, if you're honest and you don't waste people's time, I think more people have more time to deal with you and want to deal with you.
Mhm.
And you also have to come with ideas. You can't just be that guy that complains all the time. Because there are those
Yeah,
people too that just blame everyone else for shit that isn't happening. Is You got to take responsibilities. And I think that's a hard job for a lot of people, is to admit when you fucked up. You
yeah.
know, and but sometimes you got to take a shot, and it may not work out, but you learn from it.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in the idea that not there's no such thing as a bad thing. Bad things are just good things that you haven't realized yet. That lesson that you've learned from that bad thing that happened. I mean, I'm a positive person, so that's how I see things. Talk to me about the industry. The music industry is not the only thing that has bad actors, good actors. There's a lot of bullshit in many industries, but how do you avoid it? In your opinion, is it one of those things that you avoid altogether, or do you like play the game but stick to the good side of things? What's been your perspective?
I think when you've been doing it enough and growing up, um, like I did you know, there was a lot of nefarious type people around, that you learn to recognize those kind of people a mile away. And those of us
Mm,
that had success in the music business are really good at recognizing those people. So you do your research. You know, I get approached by a lot of people that have a lot of things on the go. Um, And, especially today, so many people, what would seem like to be a really great idea or a really cool thing that they're doing, no different. When you approached me about your podcast, I was like, well, I need to check this guy out before I agree to do it. I could be like,
Yeah.
there could be 5 people watching this. Is it worth my time?
Mhm.
You know? So
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It's really easy to do research today than it was years ago. Um, so you just, you try and work with good people and don't get burnt,
Mhm.
you know? I've had situations even recently that, still chasing people because they took advantage. So, you know, um, I think that, our industry, while there is schools for it and there's different schools that people go to, the one thing about our industry is that there is no rules to be in it. So
Yeah.
it's like you meet someone, oh, I'm going to be a manager now. It's like, because anybody can do it. You can just say, I'm a manager, and now you're a manager, you know?
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I did when I first started until I realized what it really meant. So I didn't really become good at what I did until probably I was at least 10 years in, where I could
Okay.
legitimately say at that point, okay, I'm good at this. And I'm still learning all the
Yeah.
time, you know?
Yeah, that pursuit of growth, like we said earlier, I don't think that ever ends, and we're the type of people that aspire to constantly be better versions of ourselves. The industry's changed so much, since you started, since the early '80s when the management trust first kind of came into existence. What I'm going somewhere with this because it's come up on a couple of my other chats. But what would you say are the main things that have changed with artist management in the '80s, '90s versus now in 2025?
So it's interesting you ask that question, Chris, because, you know, I've seen a lot of people talk about how, well, managers do way more now than they did then. Back then, the
Mhm.
manager you would get the band a record deal, and then they took care of all of that stuff. But, we always did all the stuff. My partner Alan and I, when we hooked up in 1986, when we signed the Tragically Hip, we executive produced their first record. No one wanted to sign them. We did the same thing with the Watchmen. Even with Big Rec, we paid for the record. Eventually, we sold it to Atlantic Records, but no one wanted to sign them. So we kind of did all the things that people say managers have to do now. We did it then. And so, because we were the believers
Right.
in the early days. And as we had more success, then we had more people listening to us. But we did the artist development in the early days. We put up the money to go in and make the records. Um, and so it hasn't changed that much for me. It has changed a lot for other people. Record companies don't have the same budgets they used to have. Although if you're successful, they do have those budgets that they used to
Mhm.
have. Um, the barrier to entry is way lower. Anybody can just put a song up and, it's out the next day. Uh, but back to what I said earlier, if you're not great, it doesn't matter. Um,
Mhm.
so um, uh, there's more access points, distribution's way easier. But if you're going to have a career, you got to have something more than just being able to put a record out.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed. So, um,
That makes sense. I'm not in your in your side of the industry at all. I don't understand the ins and outs. I've had a couple artists who are pretty, well known within the Canadian scene that have said that their managers, they have the same managers, they're excellent managers, they live and die by them, but some of the things like the business models have changed where it used to be based on points and now they're almost paying like consulting costs or weekly or not weekly, sorry, hourly charges for the work because of the how the sales of albums, et cetera, has changed. Have you noticed that as well?
yeah, those guys aren't real managers.
So
You
you think
know,
it should just still be Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's you eat what you kill. It should be a commission-based thing. There's got to be an incentive. What's the incentive if you know you're going to get a paycheck at the end of the week? You know, the only paycheck I've ever received was the one I wrote to myself, you know? Um,
Hmm.
um, yeah. Uh, there's so many, there's a whole bunch of guys and women out there and companies that like, oh, we're management consultants because they don't want to take any risk, right? But guess what?
Yeah.
Low risk, low reward. If you take
Yeah.
that couple of grand a month, you know, or 3 grand a month or whatever it is as a consultant to look after the affairs, what's your motivation to want to make seven figures and you know make the real money? Is there's no motivation
Hmm.
because you're sitting back getting a paycheck. So you end up having 10 acts that are paying you 3 grand a month each, except none of them are ever going to be huge because you're not motivated. So I don't
Nothing
buy into
ventured, nothing
the
gained.
I actually there was an artist and I didn't have a lot of time for this particular artist. Uh, uh, because this artist was a wealthy guy. He was a guitar player. He really wanted to have a manager, but he wasn't making any money. And I said, "Look, I don't have the time to take someone on like you if I can't make any money." And he said, "Well, how about if I put you on a retainer?" And it was the only time I ever did that. Now I treated him no different than any other artist. Um, but when he ran out of money, you know, he just didn't want to pay anymore. And then he sort of gave it up because he had another
Yeah.
job, and it was like always a plan B for him. And for me, it's always a plan A. So, so even with the artist I do work with, it's like it's got to be a plan A, especially at
Absolutely.
the beginning. If it's not a plan A, then you know it's just always going to be a hobby.
I think there's a lot of artists, maybe even most artists, that feel like the album's done and now I just want like the success. How do you pick and choose an artist that you're going to work with? How do you know if they're equally motivated like you are when there is no money?
You can tell right away when you meet with them. You know, for me, it's always been, uh, I always ask the question, you want to be rich or you want to be famous?
Mhm.
And uh, you can guess which one is the one that is important to me. And it's not
Yeah.
famous. You know? So, because you could be famous for a lot of things, it doesn't mean you're going to be successful. Um, and
$100%.
you can tell when someone's really into it, when they really want to do it. And I can tell from live performance too. Live performance is a big thing for me um, with an act because, you know, in the long run, that's where you're going to make the most money is playing live and when you get to be playing big
Mhm.
show. And that's the goal. Nobody starts out saying, "Hey, I can't wait to be the biggest band in the clubs." You know, that's the goal is to be playing arenas and stadiums, you know.
Mhm. In your, career, just because this is something I only thought of before this chat, and I thought it was kind of fascinating, is when you take a chance on an act, as you said just now, that it's nothing ventured, nothing gained, it's risk reward. When you take a chance on an act and it doesn't go anywhere, how does that materialize? Is it just a simple conversation of this isn't working out, we have to part ways? Do you try a little bit more? What is that type of relationship like?
I think that you kind of know. And it's happened plenty of times with me where it's like, you know, it's run its course. You tried,
Mhm.
didn't work, it didn't connect for whatever reason, and it ran its course. You know, I had that recently with an artist. We had a 5-year deal with them, and after 4 years, we were kind of like, yeah, it's kind of run its course. And it wasn't that we, you know, there wasn't an issue with either one of us. It was just like, yeah, I think maybe it's time to move on, and that's happened.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like any relationship. Not everyone is gonna. If all of us had the magic potion that everything you touched was going to turn into like gold, excuse the pun, um, you know, then every, then we'd all be really wealthy. But that's not, it's not how it works. Um,
Mhm.
and sometimes I'll fall in love with an act that I fall in love with that I think is going to be amazing, and nobody else, no matter how hard I try, I can't convince everybody. So, you know, you take your shot, and the act takes their shot, um, and we'll see what happens. Like, very few of the acts that I haven't had success with have gone on to have success otherwise. So at least I can say I've given it the best that I could, you know.
Right.
Uh, but it's not an unusual thing. Um, to even
That
with
that
the hip,
that
we worked together, for 17 years, and then they decided they wanted a new manager, and then they did their thing for a long time, and then we got back together again. So
Mhm.
that kind of stuff happens all the time.
Yeah. You spurred a thought. I'm working with so many different artists. I mean, with the website, I've seen, hundreds of artists over the last 20 years, if not thousands, kind of come and go. Some have endured, most have not. When you, I don't know how to phrase the question, but you come across a band that you love, Jake, you're like, oh my God, these guys are so talented and the world needs to hear their music. It's exceptional musicianship, but it just never happens. Is it luck? Is it timing? Is that more common than we realize? Because that's something that a lot of artists ask, and I don't think that they understand how hard it is to make it, so to speak.
Well, I think it's, I say luck is knowing when to seize opportunity. Um, and sometimes it's timing, um,
Mhm.
where, and sometimes, um, it's just not connecting, like you can have, you know, someone once asked me, what's your job? And as a manager, I think my most important job is knowing when to spot charisma. And you really, if you're not a charismatic artist, um, it's going to be pretty hard to sell it to somebody else because you got to be able to move people. And I've been lucky enough to work with some great artists who had that ability to move people, and some of them more than others. And I think
Mhm.
that's kind of the litmus test: is can that person command an audience? And so sometimes you think they can, but um, because you're almost hoping that they're going to become that, and then they never do.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe I was the wrong guy for that band, because not every manager's the right manager for the right band, you know?
Mhm. I read online, in one of the, myriad of other interviews you've done in the past that, going forward, you remain motivated by doing the right thing, and you've alluded to that a lot on this call as well. What for you, I guess, outside of trying your best for these artists, is there something else that is the right thing for you?
Um, I think it's the right thing for the act. I just think that, um, you know, uh, historically, uh, with me, it's always been, you know, we w- make a decision on what you're going to do based on, in my mind, has always been this 85% rule. If 85% of it is a good, if there's a chance that 85% of it is going to go well, or there's an
Mhm.
85% chance that it's going to go well, then it's something you do. And if it falls below that, then don't do it. So
Mhm.
that's where is doing the right thing, is is always look at every opportunity and saying, is this going to work for us in the long run? Is it going to work for us in the short run? I think too many artists make decisions based on the short term, and not the long term. Um, and I've always been, I jokingly like to say I'm into long term greed versus short term greed. Um,
Mm,
and so I think it's important you make decisions for what is it going to mean in 5 years, what is it going to mean in 10 years. Because
yeah.
if you don't take that view, then you're not in it for the long haul. And if you want to have artists that have a career, then you want to be in it for the long haul. When I came back, starting up out with the hip again in 2020, you know, I sat down with them and I laid out a 5-year plan. Well, here we are 5 years later. Now I'm laying out another 5-year plan, you know, for them. So that's the kind
Mm.
of stuff you have to do. So the right thing is the right thing for that artist. Not every artist is the same right thing, too.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I do agree that it's not about the short term wins, that it's about the long term vision and how you can, impact positively impact that for as long as possible. I actually had a real estate agent in Toronto once, Martin Kaczynski, amazing guy, and he you know, I think I went with my ex to like 2 or 3 different places, and he kept saying, "Okay, like, I don't wanna sell you this one," and eventually I said, like, "What are you doing? Aren't you supposed to get a commission? Like, should we not be putting in offers in one of these places?" And he said, "No, Chris, I'm trying to develop a relationship with you so that you have a home that you love and I can work with you for years to come, not make a quick buck and then walk away."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's developing relationships. And relationships is, that's the world we live in.
Mhm.
I tell a funny story. There's this guy, and I went to a couple of Blue Jay games with him this year, and he has seasons tickets, and a bunch of us buy a bunch of his tickets. But he used to run the biggest talent agency in the country. It was called the Agency. And
Okay.
when I first started, he was the president of the agency, not the agency group. It was called the Agency, and his name's David Bluestein. They call him Blue. And I remember early in my career, like 81, maybe early 82, I'd be hanging out at their offices looking for gigs for my band. And he had the first office when you walked in the door, and he looked like Jerry Garcia. In fact, he played Jerry Garcia in that movie, Half Baked. The guy that played Jerry Garcia at
Okay.
the end of that's him. That's actually him. And he was a deadhead, and he called me into his office one day, and I just was hanging out. And he says, "Come on in here, kid." I was this young kid. I was 23 years old, and he had his feet up on his desk, and he was smoking a joint. And he says to me, "What business are we in?" And I said, "We're in the music business." And he said, "Nope." I said, "Oh, we're in the concert business." And he said, "Nope." I said, "Oh, we're in the recording business." He said, "Nope." He said, "We're in the relationship business, kid. Always remember that." And so that stuck with me forever. It's like building relationships and doing it, creating relationships that aren't transactional.
Mhm.
It's like this guy, this real estate agent, he was showing you a bunch of places. He wanted you to trust him. He wanted you to see that it wasn't just about the one transaction, that he wanted you to realize that he was the guy that was going to be there for you all the time, whether it
Yeah.
was to get something or not. And I when I was given the Hall of Fame award, I gave a speech and I talked about being a taker and being a giver. And I think that there's a lot of takers in the business who don't understand that if all you do is take, eventually no one's going to give you anymore. And
Mhm.
so you have to give altruistically. You have to give not expecting anything in return, and that goes back to doing the right thing is you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because you're going to get something for it. And you may get something for it down the road, or you may not. Uh, but I've always been that guy that someone asks for a favor, I'll do it. I don't expect anything in return. If I get something in return, great.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's building relationships, and that's something that the really successful people in our business, you remember what a Rolodex was. Not the younger audience may not understand it, but the really successful people in our business have a very extensive Rolodex. And there was that saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I
Mhm.
say it's not what you know, it's who knows you. Is so if I make a call to someone, they're going to take the call and they're going to respond, whether it's an email or a phone call or whatever it is. And that is money in the bank when you can
Yeah.
build up those kind of relationships. And that only happens because you don't always have your hand out. You're not there just asking all the time for something.
I totally agree. It speaks volumes to your character. It speaks volumes to, your success and why you've come this far. I think that character is so important to how we show up over and over again consistently. It's the little things. I started to do this when I was younger in my sales career, and every time I knew that I needed to call someone to ask for something, I didn't call them to ask for that thing. I called them to check in with them first. And then I made a note to call them later to ask for that thing, just because it built better will and it built a stronger relationship. Let me ask you one last question, just for the artists out there. And I don't want you to, say there's a de facto answer. I don't want you to give anything away, but I loved how you talked about transparency and doing things based on a net positive. I spoke recently with James Rhodes, the president of Fixed Music. It's a label that's been around for 20 years. They're quite successful as far as indies go. And we talked about label deals. And he said, honestly, like our founder, our president is an artist and he was getting screwed on these crazy deals. So we just did everything 50-50 net so that we didn't make money if the artist didn't make money and vice versa. Is there some specific deal that an artist should be looking for when they're signing with a manager?
Well, first of all, on the label side, those 50-50 deals have been going on forever. That's kind of what all the independents, any decent independent, that's what they do. All the big independents that I know, they do 50-50 deals, 50-50 net. Um, uh, uh, there's a bunch of advantages to having that. There's disadvantages to that too. Um, as far as an artist management deal, anybody that asks you for money up front, don't sign with them. As I said before, managers have to be just as invested as you are. But managers aren't there to put up money. Some may choose to. Um, I have a different deal than some. Some managers charge a lower percentage and they charge back all their expenses. And then meanwhile, you're paying all these bills. The artist is paying
Mhm.
all these bills to travel and hotels and meals because every time they take someone to dinner or whatever, I don't charge back expenses. So I don't need someone looking over my shoulder telling me what kind of plane I should fly on and what kind of room I should stay in and where I can eat and stuff like that. So I would rather pay my own bills and charge what I charge, you know. 15, 20%, anything more than 20, I think is wrong. From a manager's standpoint. Um, and then also depending on the workload of the artist, most managers
Yeah.
charge 20, but if you're taking on a client that's already big, that's already kind of done a lot of the early legwork that needs to be done, then you're probably not going to get away with charging 20. Um, but that's the roundabout way to go. But anybody that asks for money or asks to be paid weekly or asks for you to pay their expenses, that's not a real manager.
Yeah. Fair. Jake, I really appreciate your time. I'm so grateful that you imparted not only the wisdom on me, but the time as well, because I know how valuable it is. Um, I'm going to leave it there and do what I always do, which is pass the mic over to you to give us one last thought, one last word before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think everybody should, like, if you're going to be in our business, then build relationships. Be honest. I just came back from a conference in Aspen. It's the 30th year of this conference, and every year I meet new people and I learn new things. And in life in general, like, it's really important to be curious all the time. Like, if you're not curious, then you're dead. You always got to be wanting to do new things and learn new things and just be curious. I read a lot. I read a lot of trades. I read a lot of non-music things. I'm just curious all the time, and I think that's what keeps me going. So be curious.